All right, guys, good afternoon. I hope you're doing well. We are looking at our Punnet square lesson today. So this is another Pear Deck activity. You guys, this one is student-led, so you guys are able to do this on your own. I'm just going to be providing some information in this lesson video. You guys can watch this video as you go through. So on our first slide, you can go ahead and you can write your name. And then we're going to start talking about genes. So a gene is one set of instructions for an inherited trait. So an example is genes that code for your eye color. So remember, we had talked about chromosomes, right? And those chromosomes look like this a little bit. And so what chromosomes are is they're DNA strands that are really tightly wound together, right? So they kind of are like this. So they're actually like these really squiggly little dudes. And on each of these DNA strands, on each side, one you get from mom, one you get from dad, there are different genes. So a gene is just a portion of this, right? So maybe this right here that I've marked out in blue, that's the gene for eye color. And then let's say this one that I'm marking out in green, this is the gene for hair color. But they're wound on the DNA strand in your chromosome. So you can see here, we've marked that this right here is a single gene, right? So it's just this is what we're boxing off. There's then another gene attached to this, and all of these genes are linked together to make our DNA strands, and then that DNA strand is tightly wound so that we get our allele. So the allele is that one half of the, oh my gosh, my brain, kiddo, sorry, is the one half of the chromosome that gives us different forms of a gene, right? So you get one allele from mom and you get one allele from dad. So let's say that this blue one is the dad allele, and then you have this pink one is the mom allele, right? So mom and dad might have the same form of the gene, or they might have different. So they might be homozygous or the same, or they could be heterozygous or different. So in this example that we're getting, right, we have a dominant allele for brown eye color, and then a recessive allele for blue eye color. So we'll say that mom, let's say that this is the eye color gene, right? Mom has a capital B for brown, and dad has a lowercase b for blue. So these are the two different alleles that we have. We put them together and we mark our capital letters for dominant and lowercase letters for recessive. So this would be your allele pair or your chromosome pair, right? But one allele is brown, one allele is blue. So remember, dominant is capital, recessive is lowercase. An allele is a different form of the gene, right? Is it brown or blue? And the gene is a set of instructions to inherit a trait. So the gene is the instruction. The allele is what form it's going to take, what we're physically going to see. So in the text box here provided, please go ahead and describe the difference between an allele and a gene. If you need to pause this video to go ahead and do that, you may. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on in the video. So when we talk about our alleles and our genes, we have to talk about the phenotype and the genotype. So the phenotype is the physical appearance. It's something that you can physically see on a person. The genotype is the chemical composition of the DNA. So the genotype is the allele representation, right? It's those two letters that we put together. So over here, you can see we have a genotype of lowercase b, with eye color. This is going to be a blue eye color. So this is what this person got in their alleles from their parents. Now, the way that that physically appears is to have blue eyes, right? So the phenotype is physically being able to see that someone's eyes are blue, right? With a recessive trait, right, it's obvious. They have blue eyes, they must have 2 lowercase letters. But with a dominant trait, right, so if this was brown eyes, they might be able to hold or have a recessive lowercase b, but because they have that dominant capital B for brown, that's what the phenotype is. So that's why it's important for us to have this distinction between the genotype and the phenotype. So remember, your genotype is always going to be a 2-letter code. It can be all lowercase, all uppercase, or a mixture of upper and lowercase. It will always be 2 letters next to one another. A phenotype is going to be something like a description: blue, straight, curly, wrinkly, flat, round, yellow, right? These are all examples of a phenotype. So go ahead on yours, drag and drop. Actually, you're not going to drag and drop. You're going to rewrite a type or draw a line to which of these belong under which column. So remember, a phenotype is going to be something that you could physically see, like a color or a quality. A genotype is going to be our 2-letter combination. If you need to pause the video, you are more than welcome to. We are going to go ahead and move on. All right. So now that we've talked about phenotype and genotype, we're going to move on to homozygous and heterozygous. So we kind of referenced this earlier in the lesson, and we've learned about this previously last week. Homozygous is 2 identical alleles. It means that you have both parents giving the dominant trait or both parents giving the recessive trait. So when we say homozygous, right, that means 2 capitals or 2 lowercase, right? Homozygous, homo means same. Zygous is another way for us to say trait, right? So homozygous means same trait. I have 2 capitals or I have 2 lowercases for recessive. Now, when I talk about heterozygous, these are 2 different alleles. So that means that one parent gave a dominant allele and one parent gave a recessive allele, right? So we have capital and lowercase in each of our examples. Just like with homozygous, heterozygous is hetero is different. Zygous is trait. So homozygous, same trait, heterozygous, different trait. You guys might have seen homo and hetero before, right? When we talk about someone being homosexual versus heterosexual. Heterosexual individuals, they have a man and a woman in that relationship. Homosexual individuals are the same, right? It's a man and a man or a woman and a woman, right? So you can maybe use that to help that homozygous, our letters are going to be the same. They're both going to be capital or they're both going to be lowercase. Versus heterozygous, they're going to be different. One will be capital, one will be lowercase. So you guys are going to rewrite or draw a line between my guys over here. Remember that homozygous is same and heterozygous is different. So if it's homozygous, they're both capital or both lowercase. If they're heterozygous, it means we have one of each, one capital and one lower. So go ahead, work on this slide. You can pause the video if you need to complete it, but I'm going to go ahead and continue forward. So now we can talk about geno and phenotype and how they represent for us. The genotype can directly tell us about the phenotype. So here's an example. In plants, if T capitalized is tall, so dominant. And then the T lowercase is for short, is recessive. Then if I have a homozygous pair of capital T's, right? So two dominant T's, I'm going to have a tall phenotype. So if my genotype is two dominants, I'm going to have my phenotype be the dominant trait, which is tall. If I have homozygous recessive, so two lowercase t's, then I have a short phenotype. So my genotype is two lowercase t's to show both parents gave a recessive gene. The phenotype that we're seeing is that that plant is short. Now, if we have heterozygous, right? So I have one parent gives a dominant, one parent gives a recessive, then I'm still going to have my phenotype be a tall plant, right? Because we have this dominant trait here, but the genotype is going to be different than the homozygous plant, right? Because my heterozygous has one of each. So that means that this tall plant has the opportunity of passing on that short gene to its offspring. So if there's at least one capital letter present when we're looking at the genotype, then the dominant trait will appear. That capitalized trait will appear. So we can use this information to help us use Punnett squares. So Punnett squares are something that genealogists have gone ahead and created to help us kind of predict what offspring traits can be, right? So this is what a Punnett square looks like. It's a tool to predict the traits in an offspring. So you can see, we're going to go back with eye color for this one. I have dad who has blue eyes, right? So two lowercase b's here, because this is dad's genotype. So his genotype is two recessive b's. His phenotype is blue eyes. Now, mom's phenotype is brown eyes because we have our capital B, but my genotype is heterozygous, right? So we have a heterozygous genotype that results in a brown phenotype, and we have a homozygous recessive dad. So let's look and see how you guys can create this. So there's 5 steps to creating a Punnett square. First, we're going to determine the genotypes of parent organisms and write down in the cross. Then we're going to create a 2x2 square. We're going to split the genotypes and place them on top of the square and the other one to the left of the square. Boxes will inherit the letter from their row and column. And then finally, we're going to be able to interpret the Punnett square. Each square is going to be worth 25%. So let's go through this as an example. So if I have purple flowers and white flowers, and I have a mom who is heterozygous genotype and a dad who's homozygous recessive genotype, we want to find the probability that the offspring are going to have white flowers. So the first thing we need to do is determine the genotypes of the parents and write down the cross. So this is what the cross is going to look like, right? We're going to have mom with our capital P lowercase p, so our heterozygous genotype. And we're going to have dad with our homozygous recessive, so two lowercase p's. This is all you have to do for step 1, is write down this cross. Now we're going to draw a 2x2 square. So now I have my 2x2 square. The next step is to split the genotypes. So you're going to choose one side for mom and one side for dad. It does not matter which you do as long as you get one on each. Now, we're going to write on the top and on the side. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to write in the boxes what the offspring can potentially inherit. So because we have a capital P and a lowercase p for our heterozygous pair and 2 lowercase p's for our homozygous pair, we're going to go ahead and cross. So in our upper left box, we're going to take mom's dominant purple gene and dad's recessive white gene. Then we're going to take mom's recessive white gene and dad's recessive white gene for our top right. In the bottom, we're going to take our mom's dominant purple gene and dad's recessive white gene, and then we'll do 2 recessive white genes in the bottom right. So now we can interpret this. Remember, each box is worth 25%. And if we have a capital letter, it's going to have a phenotype of the dominant trait. So in this case, a purple flower. So these two genotypes are going to represent a homozygous recessive, right, or white flowers. So there is a 50% chance, because I have 25 plus 25, 50% chance that the offspring will have white flowers. So again, there's a 50% chance, for us I have 25 and 25% chance that the offspring will have white flowers. Okay, we don't have to worry about this because the question is not asking for purple flowers. But if you were looking, we also have 2 boxes of purple phenotype flowers, right? So therefore, we also have a 50% chance of heterozygous purple flowers. So we have the offspring of 2 gray heterozygous rats. Gray is dominant over white, which is recessive. You're going to go ahead and you're going to drag your dot icon around the heterozygous genotypes. So remember, heterozygous are different. Heterozygous are different. So drag your dot icon onto the heterozygous genotype. You can pause the video if you need to, but we're going to go ahead and continue. So we're going to determine the genotypes of the parent organisms and write down the cross. So we have 2 gray heterozygous rats. Gray is dominant over white, which is recessive. So before I write my cross down, I am going to say capital G equals gray. Lowercase g equals white. So that way I remember. So I have 2 gray heterozygous. So you can see in my cross, I've written down 1/2 of our cross. What will the other parent's genome look like? What will their genotype be? Remember, 2 heterozygous. So if I've listed 1 heterozygous, what will go in my second spot? All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move forward. I'm going to erase this. If you need to pause the video to finish figuring this out, you may. Otherwise, continue forward with me. So the next thing we're going to do is draw our 2x2 square. You don't have to do anything on this guy. Now we're up to slide part 3. So now we're going to split the genotypes and place one on top of the square and the other on the left of the square. So predict the offspring of 2 gray heterozygous rats. So you guys can draw. You can use your mouse to draw, or you can type in each of the boxes. This is what you should have, right? So you should have this capital G, lowercase g, lowercase g. So now what we're going to do is we're going to predict what the offspring will get. So we're going to just copy down uppercase, 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 lowercase, right? And continue on filling in the inside of the box. Remember, guys, if I'm going too fast, feel free to pause and complete each slide as you need. Finally, on slide this part 5, we are now able to interpret the Punnet square. So remember, each square within our Punnet square is worth 25. So we need to figure out how many of these offspring will be gray and how many will be white. Remember, as long as we have one dominant allele or one dominant trait inherited from a parent, you will look like the dominant. So if gray or capital G is dominant and white or lowercase g is recessive, what percentage of the offspring will be gray and what percentage of the offspring will be white? If you need to pause this slide, you may go ahead and fill out. All right, guys. So we're on to our definitions. So these are your vocabulary words. We talked about all of these words in our worksheet today. If you need to go back to previous slides to find your definitions, you may. Remember, this is student-based, so you can flip through this as you would like. But you're just going to go ahead and you're going to use your drawing tool to draw right wherever you think this goes. Okay? I am drawing random lines to demonstrate, and now I'm doodling apparently. All right, guys. You can pause this video if you need to, but pretty much the rest of this is for you guys to work on your own. It is all practice from here on out. So you can spend the second half of the period going ahead and completing the practice slides. We will review them together on Thursday as we get ready to start talking about the next portion of our biology unit. Remember, if you do need help, please get in contact with a staff member in one of the TA help desks. All of the TAs should be there, and they will be able to help you. I will see you guys on Thursday, and I hope you're having a great day. Bye.